we're going to continue our review of linear relationships by looking at the slope, or also known as the rate of change. We're going to use the same example as in my previous video, which talked about the cost of producing 1,000 copies of a school yearbook as it relates to the number of pages in the yearbook. So, when we look at the slope, there are three different equations. If we look at the first equation, we're looking at points along the graph. Points along the graph can be determined by looking at nice points which align with the grid. I've already determined these points and I've plotted them into a table of values. So here I'll choose 2 points. This is a nice easy point which has a coordinate of an x coordinate of 0 and a y coordinate of 8,000. The next nice point that we've found on this graph is an x coordinate of 50 and a y coordinate of 11,000. So if you recall that this is my first x value, this is my second x value, as I always choose my first point from the furthest left to the furthest right. Then I have my first y value and my second y value. So I can then plug these numbers into my equation. So the equation asks for my y2 value first, which is 11,000. Then it asks me to subtract this first y value, which was 8,000. And I have to put that all over my second x value, which is 50. And I have to subtract my first x value, which is 0. If I apply this through, I have 3,000 over 50, which gives me a value of 60. So my slope, which is always given as a variable m, is equal to 60. So what 60 represents according to this graph, in the context of this graph, is that for one page to be printed in my yearbook, it's going to cost me $60. That's what it's describing according to this graph. So for every page printed in the yearbook, it will cost me $60. It's expensive to print yearbooks. Another way of looking at this is the change in y over the change in x, which we did using our table of values. As you can see, I chose the first 2 points, which were the first 2 rows of my table of values. So I will have similar values. I would have 3,000 as my change in y over my change in x, which is 50. These are again similar ratios as I did in my first equation. So 3,000 divided by 50 should also give me 60. Since this is talking about the same graph, I should get the same slope. Another method that we had looked at is looking at the rise and the run. So if you recall, the rise is how much up do I have to go versus how much across do I have to go. Keep in mind that going up each block is $1,000, and for each block to the right is 25. So I moved up 1, 2, 3 blocks, so that's 3,000, and I moved 1, 2 blocks to the right, which is 50. So again, 3,000 over 50 gives me 60 for my slope. Regardless of which equation I use, I get the same slope, which is the same rate of change, which determines how much it costs for every page printed in the yearbook.